Welcome back everyone, another year, another iPhone success in 2020 X video, and hopefully 2021 is better than 2020 for a lot of you, but nonetheless, the iPhone success is one of those devices that I've been talking about so much over the years, a lot of people love, and every single year, it's almost one of the first, revisited reviews I always do, and the reason being is because a lot of people want to see it. Throughout the numbers that I see and throughout the hype throughout the year, a lot of people either still own the iPhone 6s, use it, or maybe they're just interested on how this phone is going to hold up throughout this year. Now I'm going to break down basically what I think, the future outlook of this device is, and at the end of it, whether it's still worth it or not. Now, if you want to pick up this phone, I probably wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend at least picking up something like an iPhone 8 or an iPhone SE 2, but I'll go ahead and leave a 6s and some other, phones linked down below. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now, on the outside of this device, specifically the display, we still have that 4.7-inch panel, which in this day and age, I'll be honest, is outdated, but at the same time, it's really not, because right now, Apple is still selling the iPhone SE 2. They also plan on selling an iPhone SE 2 Plus sometime this year or next year, which is still going to maintain that home button design. So it's not like this phone is completely outdated. It's a little bit old, but it's really not that bad, especially when you consider the fact this is over a 5-year-old phone at this, point. And also it's super cheap, so that's another huge thing to keep in mind. You have Touch ID on the front too, which is really nice. On the bottom, the lightning port and headphone jack. This phone supports it, so that's another cool reason as to why somebody might want to pick this phone up. Now, on the back, you have that aluminum back, which I'm totally okay with. This phone still feels like a pretty premium device. Doesn't feel cheap at all. And I'm pretty sure the whole entire 2021, device list is going to be, glass backs or frosted glass backs. And if that's the case, this phone still feels pretty premium. And you do have that single camera setup on the back as well, which we'll go ahead and hit on. This thing has that single 12 megapixel sensor, and surprisingly, Apple still has only made 12 megapixel sensors on all their iPhones so far. Of course, they're higher quality and they're way better than this one, but it's still pretty interesting that the megapixel count is still the same, even though it really doesn't mean a crazy amount. Now, you have 4K at 30 capability on this phone too, which is amazing for this type of device. Again, if you want to go ahead and pick up this phone just for the camera, I probably wouldn't recommend it, but this phone holds a special place in a lot of people's hearts because this was the first iPhone that we actually had the capability of shooting 4K videos. Now, in this day and age, I still shoot all my videos in 1080p, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people only use 1080p, but 4K at 30 is, hyping up, and I feel like more and more people are going to be using 4K at 30, and I've actually been seeing a lot more TikTok, people talking about, upping your resolution by going to 4K at 30. So that's another big thing. I see a lot more people that, ended up using it, but this phone has that capability, which is cool. No 4K at 60, no additional lenses, but for a 5-year-old device, I think it's okay, and especially considering the fact the SE2, also only has a single camera setup. You can do 4K at 60 on that, but still only a single camera setup. I think the iPhone 6s is still in pretty decent company, especially for being a 5-year-old device that you can pick up for less than $80 in a lot of places. The front camera is 5 megapixels and only 720p videos there. Definitely not the craziest capability when it comes down to cameras, but I think it's totally okay for the most part. So in terms of the camera setup, that pretty much covers it up. Now, one of the biggest changes that I think is going to happen throughout this year is the software lifecycle. And what I see happening is that Apple, is pretty much going to stop supporting the iPhone 6s in terms of the next official version of software. So going from iOS 14 to iOS 15, the iPhone 6s is not going to get iOS 15 based on everything that I'm hearing. Now, is that the end of the world? Absolutely not. This phone still has a ton of capability in my opinion, but more so than that, this phone also has the ability of, still probably maintaining security updates. We saw with the iPhone 6 and iPhone 5s, it didn't get iOS 13 or iOS 14, but Apple is still supporting that device list for both of them, 3 of them, including the 6 Plus. So I kind of see Apple doing the same thing here. They're going to support the 6S, 6S Plus, and iPhone SE, and they're just going to keep supporting it until I guess the iPhone 7 stop getting unsupported, which may be until iOS 16. So we're going to get still a long supported software on this device, and if not, it's still going to be a really good version of software for this phone to end off. And you still have that checkra and jailbreak capability on any version of software too. So that's another pretty big thing to keep in mind. So in terms of software, that pretty much covers it up. Now in terms of the performance, which I'm pretty sure everyone wants to hear about, this phone has a little bit more of a dated, Apple A9 chip inside of it, a dual-core CPU, and 2 gigabytes of RAM on each model. Now what I can tell you is that this was actually the first iPhone to bring 2 gigs of RAM, just like how it was the first iPhone to bring 4K at 30. And what I can tell you is that for sure, it's definitely not, the fastest performing phone. It's definitely not, the best performing iPhone ever. But what I can tell you is that for a 5-year-old phone that's still getting software support, that has crazy features still, I think it has more than enough capability for, it to be someone's daily phone for the most part. Now, is it going to be someone's daily phone and they're going to think they have the best phone? Absolutely not. But if you had to actually use this phone, I think you would probably go, perfectly fine with it. And the reason I say that is because I have compared this phone. First of all, I've been using this phone for many years, but I have been comparing this phone against so many other competitors, the iPhone SE2, the iPhone 12s, the iPhone 11s, the iPhone 10s, the 10Rs. I have found that for the most part, this phone, the biggest problem with it is the slowness of it and the gaming aspect. But once the apps are loaded, once Snapchat is loaded or once Instagram is loaded on your display and all this stuff, you're going to have probably the same experience as you would on any other phone for the most part. As long as you're not comparing it side by side to another phone, you're going to be totally okay. You still have, support for pretty much every single app that's ever came out. There's really nothing crazy that like an iPhone 12 can do that the iPhone 6s cannot do. Of course, it's not as fast, it's not as smooth, but you're still getting the same type of support. And hopefully that makes sense. I mean, again, I would not go and downgrade to the iPhone 6s because I like having a faster phone and like having more capabilities. But the iPhone 6s is still a pretty fast and a pretty smooth phone still. Now, throughout my time, even in 2020, I have seen that iOS 14 has taken a little bit of toll in the smoothness factor, but I feel like that may be fixed throughout probably from now until that, April timeframe. But once come like around May, June, and we get the final versions of iOS 14, I feel like we're going to have a really solid, polished version of software as we always do year after year. And since this is probably going to be the last update we're having, in that case, I would think it would still be perfectly fine for people to pick up this phone even maybe like a year after this video, possibly. If it ends off in a smooth spot. If it's not smooth, then it probably wouldn't be a good recommendation. But I think the performance aspect is probably one of its better assets for sure. Now, on the flip side, the worst aspect of this phone still is the battery life. This phone doesn't really have that good battery life. 1,715 milliamp hours on a, brand new battery. I'm sure a lot of you are going to end up buying this thing used, or you've probably had it for a while. The battery's degraded. This thing's battery is not that great anymore. I've compared it to a ton of iPhones and it has really gone down quite a bit, especially with iOS 14. But Apple has made battery cases. You can easily replace the battery if you know how to open up a phone and stuff. It's still pretty easy on this device. So you still have some capability of repairability and stuff, but the battery life just isn't really the best aspect of it. So keep that in mind. But to kind of sum up this video and to answer this first, review of this year, I guess, is the iPhone 6s still worth it in 2021? Well, let me tell you like this, and let me break down some pros and some cons. First of all, the iPhone 6s, I think, is such an impactful phone and it has so much capability at the time it was released. And even in this day and age, it still surprises me. I think this was one of the biggest transitions from one iPhone to the other, going from the iPhone 6 to the 6s. There was a lot of differences there for sure. Now, you're still getting a really good build quality of a device. This phone still feels pretty good. It doesn't quite feel like $1,000 phone anymore. It was never a $1,000 phone, but it still feels pretty premium. Parts to repair this phone are super cheap too, so if you accidentally crack the screen or crack the camera, you can easily replace it for the most part, which is another huge asset for it. You're still getting software support for the most part. You know that you're guaranteed probably up until May or June, but if this phone ends up getting iOS 15, even better. But I would plan out for May or June officially ending, but getting security updates here and there. You still have, a pretty decent camera on it. You still have Apple's ecosystem for the most part as well. So that's another pretty big thing to keep in mind. Now, it wouldn't be the first phone I would recommend to people, even for an older generation device. I think the lowest I would go is an iPhone 7, but an iPhone 8 would be a really good sweet spot for a lot of people to pick up if they're in the market for it. But by all means, I think if you currently own a 6s, I would recommend keeping it for as long as you can. There's no harm in keeping it. But as always, I would always recommend people to go to the next step up they can. And in this case, the next step up is an iPhone 7. but I wouldn't go through the trouble just to pick up an iPhone 7 because I think that the best position you can go for from one device to the other and a mixture of performance, stability, longevity, price tag is probably something like a used iPhone XR. Those devices you can pick up for like less than $400 in a lot of places, and I'll leave one link down below as well. And those are a really good set of devices that have a lot of capability. They're not super expensive, and they're just, really good values, and they're going to be lasting for a very long time as well. So I think the iPhone 6s definitely has a couple of problems, but I think it's still a pretty decent phone for being a 5-year-old device that's still supported, and it's fairly cheap. And I think these things are really easy to pick up. Like I said, it wouldn't be my first phone to recommend to people, but if you happen to stumble across one and it's in your budget, I think it's still a decent pickup. It's a decent all-around phone for being in 2021. Like I said, if somebody, released this phone, if a manufacturer released a phone like this in this day and age, I don't think anybody would buy it. But factoring in the age and the software and all this stuff, I think it's okay for the most part. So that really pretty much covers it up. If you guys have any other questions or anything, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count. So it means so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.